the THC content of BC Bud, Quebec Gold, and this marijuana that's currently on the streets isn't like the Cheech and Chong marijuana. It's more like cocaine. But that aside, I and members of Congress believe this ad program ought to be focused.
I'm sorry, Congressman. How is it more like coke? I don't understand what you mean by that.
In other words, the THC of old ditchweed and what was happening when I was in the college in the late 60s and early 70s had a THC of 4 to 8%, maybe as high as 12. Now we're looking at 20, 30, 40%. And the kick and the addiction you get, the destruction in your brain cells, is more like coke or crack than it is like the old-time marijuana. Prevention programs are very hard to measure. This particular study, which I would argue isn't a bipartisan study, is several years old. Not good tracking methods. In fact, the ad campaign has been reduced, which reduced some of its effectiveness. The president is proposing to put it up still 20 million short of where it was, even if you don't allow for time-adjusted dollars. But here's the fact. Drug use among youth has dropped. Marijuana use has dropped. We only have 2 prevention programs in this country that are directed right at young people, this program and drug-free schools. If it's dropping and these programs are there plus law enforcement, it would suggest that in fact they are working regardless what one opinionated study shows.
Well, but wait, you're arguing 2 things simultaneously. One is that there's no way to know, that there's no way to really measure whether it's working, and secondly that the study is opinionated and inaccurate. The study says that in fact these ads, the anti-marijuana ads, convinced teenagers that everyone was smoking pot, so they went ahead and smoked it. People who watched the ad, the GAO study says were more likely to smoke pot. If there's no evidence that the ad is effective, and indeed there is evidence that it's counterproductive, why keep going with these ads? In other words, it seems kind of faith-based a little bit.
Well, normally the pro-marijuana groups argue that all I am is a drug warrior and I want to lock everybody up. We only have 2 prevention programs. Prevention is much harder to measure. I grant that. But the fact is, I believe in results, and conservatives believe in results. And the results are combined programs. Prevention, treatment, interdiction, eradication, and law enforcement have reduced drug use. That's the result, not some poll. By the way, a similar study showed in teen pregnancy that supposed pregnancy prevention programs increased teen pregnancy use. That just because some study comes up to some conclusion that the liberals doing the study wanted to have doesn't mean that the study's accurate. Results are results. Teen pregnancy is dropping and drug use is dropping.
Okay, but Congressman, 2 things. One, I'm not arguing against drug prevention programs. I'm only arguing against a specific series of ads that were not attacked by a liberal group. It wasn't Normal that did the study. It was the Government Accounting Office, and they spent $14 million and spent 5 years studying these ads. Now, if you have some specific reason to believe this study was hijacked by liberals, state it. But I don't see any reason to believe that it was.
I have specific reason to believe that the methods used in this study, at the request of people who were challenging this program, have been hijacked. And that I believe that in general, that every single prevention program, whether it be drug-free schools, GAO did a study questioning drug-free schools. CADCA, the community action programs, they did a study questioning those. The fact is the combination of prevention programs have resulted in a reduction. I want to see results, not some kind of touchy-feely thing with a few people giving a response to a particular ad. They have no evidence. It's old data, not measured well, would never be used by a private business.
Okay. How about the emphasis on marijuana? I mean, marijuana is not obviously the most dangerous drug out there. There's crystal meth, but there are also drugs that are genuinely popular with kids that it's not clear anyone in Congress is even aware of. Prescription drugs, drugs you get from your parents, Xanax, OxyContin, Valium, drugs like that. Why aren't there more government programs aimed at making those drugs unappealing to kids? Why marijuana?
Marijuana is the primary gateway drug, although tobacco and alcohol, because they're all illegal for youth, you could argue that tobacco is a gateway drug to marijuana. Smoked marijuana is then a gateway drug for else. Furthermore, the THC content of BC Bud, Quebec Gold, and this marijuana that's currently on the streets isn't like the Cheech and Chong marijuana. It's more like cocaine. But that aside, I and members of Congress believe this ad program ought to be focused.
I'm sorry, Congressman. How is it more like coke? I don't understand what you mean by that.
In other words, the THC of old ditchweed and what was happening when I was in the college in the late 60s and early 70s had a THC of 4 to 8%, maybe as high as 12. Now we're looking at 20, 30, 40%. And the kick and the addiction you get, the destruction in your brain cells, is more like coke or crack than it is like the old-time marijuana. But that said, I agree with your point. We should have been focused more on meth. We should have been focused more on prescription drugs. Congress has sent this message over and over. I don't oppose marijuana being in the national ad campaign, but I think it needs to be broader than marijuana.
Oh, okay. And how many people died from marijuana overdoses last year?
If you count the amount of crime associated with marijuana. The
no, just marijuana overdose, just the drug itself that you said is like cocaine now. How many people died from it?
65% of emergency room admissions for drug abuse are marijuana.
Huh, okay. But did anyone die that you know of?
Presumably so. Thousands have died. The only question is, you said overdose. That isn't even most of the deaths related to prescription drug or to cocaine or heroin. There's a whole range of drug crimes and so on. I don't know the number of overdose. Marijuana is often managed with meth. No drug user is a single drug user, so marijuana is often in the mix of most deaths, so it'd be very hard to separate what's what. A marijuana user is very seldom just a casual marijuana user, except in the early stages. They're often going to polydrug.
Yeah, okay. I'm not endorsing drugs, but I know a lot of casual marijuana users, so that's wrong. But I appreciate your coming on. Thanks a lot, Congressman.
Thank you, Tucker.